Let's cut the bullshit.
Just drop the job.
Adm and Simon's bullshit busters.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Adm and Simon Bullshit Busters. I'm Simon Batchelor,
I am Adam Bastock.
and in today's episode, we are going to be looking at a headline from The Guardian UK. So, the headline in question is just 57 companies linked to 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions since 2016. So, Adam, that headline certainly grabbed my attention, as I'm sure it did yours. Thoughts?
Yes. Yes, this is my immediate kind of anger takedown thing. Because the reason why I get frustrated by this is there's a similar headline a few years ago that said like 80% of emissions are only like 7 businesses are responsible for 80% of emissions. It was something like that. It was really regularly quoted. And it was a similar report and headline. And the point is, the report behind this is very good. So I want to caveat that before I start putting the boot in that I think the analysis and the outcome of it saying, well, actually, it's fossil fuels and state actors, and it's state actors that are buying these fossil fuels, and they're driving this, and that's why we need to have this sort of systemic change and impact, which is entirely correct. So, yeah, caveat that I'm not trying to discredit that article or the details of it. The issue I have is more with the headline. In that the problem that I see is people do what we've just done, in that I read the headline and I get very, very angry for different reasons. But what we see, or what I specifically have seen as well, is a lot of people in my friend group using this as a reason not to take action and as a reason to go, well, why should I bother? I might as well go on holiday. And it's like, okay, well, that's sort of fine. That's an interesting psychological response to that. There's an interesting behavior response to that. However, certainly with this article, or certainly with the previous headline kind of report where it said, 80% of emissions are done by a certain subset of companies, is because of the way that scopes work, and the technical carbon footprinting in scope 3, the end of use of products is part of your footprint, and therefore you driving to the petrol station and filling up your car and then driving it, or you going onto a flight and buying some of that kind of fuel, that is the carbon footprint that these companies are accounting for, and that got completely missed by all of the analysis on it, apart from a very few people. And so there's this very dangerous disconnect, I think, that the headline generates, of people going, well, there's nothing I can do, therefore I will do nothing, because I can do nothing because I am not a corporation. And there's an element of truth to that, in that they are not a corporation. However, that is to say that, no man is an island and all that jazz. It's not like they're sat there doing nothing and they don't have any influence or any impact on the world in those decisions. And therefore, I think there's a real warning, and we should be very careful with distributing and how we talk about these things as individuals as well as sustainability professionals, around what does writing that headline look like, and what damage is that or has that headline done already, in terms of people going, well, it's too late, I might as well just enjoy my life rather than taking action.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the headline, so just 57 companies linked to 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions since 2016, it's missing that key point you just made, which is, and you're in that percentage. Like, your actions that you do by flying, driving, plastics, any use of connected fossil fuels, you are part of that 87%. But that isn't in the headline. It's implied, inferred, and referenced throughout the article in various ways, but it's not an explicit byline. For me, would have been, and you're part of that percentage. Like, that would be the caveat of, here's a big shiny figure, we've got the click, well done, now you're on The Guardian, would you mind giving us a £5? I get the business model and the need to do it, not knocking that. It's important to support journalism where we can. Let's not knock the kind of intention behind that grabbing. But I think there is a deeper level to this sort of headline, which is that, well, what's the fucking point then? It's like, well, if these 57 clowns have caused almost 90% of it, then I must be in the 10% of it. And therefore, literally everything I do is 9 times outweighed by the damage those people have done. So it just makes you feel powerless and meaningless. I mean, if it wasn't in The Guardian, I would say this had been paid for by ExxonMobil. Like, I would say it's it's a PR piece. Because even that makes them
Well,
look bad, anybody reading the headline isn't going to instantly link it to a fossil fuel company. They're just going to assume that they're powerless, which is what they want, which is what the big collective of fossil fuel industry wants, is to make people feel like their actions don't mean anything.
it's that FUD, isn't it, of fear, uncertainty, and distrust,
Mm.
and the more that can spread, and we see that there's several articles that have linked that, also probably in the Guardian, quite successfully to fossil fuel companies dispelling, like pushing uncertainty around like nuclear power or uncertainty around solar panels or wind turbines or
Yeah.
electric car batteries to try and slow down the transition. That is a whole separate episode.
Oh,
I've just found the
it will
original
be.
report. Yes, that'll be a bottle of wine
Yeah.
and a lot of shouting, I imagine. The other article was from 2017 that said, and again, just found the headline here, just 100 companies responsible for 71% of global emissions.
Mm.
So I think that's the issue with the previous headline was the word responsible there, which then meant people read that and went, okay, great, so I'm not responsible
Yeah.
for that. So
Yeah.
I think there's two things to take away from this. One is the language that we're using to describe big corporates and governments and their impact here, but two is also the emotional state of people, in
Mm.
that people are, and again, this is something I see in workshops, people are looking for a get out clause. They're looking, this is overwhelming, this is a scary topic, it's much easier not to think about it, and therefore people are primed to say, great, this isn't something that I can do, and therefore I will go and do something else.
Yeah.
Which is fine. You can't really blame that on the individual, and I don't think we should be attributing too
No.
much blame to consumers for this. But I don't think this is a blame game. This is a responsibility and empowerment game of going,
Mm.
actually, how do we empower people to realize that they are the solution to this and that they will have a better life if they are the solution to this? Because guess what? The less fossil fuels we burn, the nicer our air is. Because if you sit in a diesel car in a garage that's idling, you have quite a bad time. Whereas if you sat in a garage that's locked with an electric bike or something, as long as it's not bursting into flames because it's really badly done with battery management systems. Just before we get emails in
I was
about
going to
that,
say,
I know that
you've
will
headed
happen.
off the comments at the past there. Well done.
Yeah, then you're going to have a much better time. Asterisk, assuming it's not on fire as well.
Mm.
So I think there is this transition piece of going, well, actually, why are people saying these things? And I think that's what we need to be aware of when you're looking on LinkedIn, or whether you're looking on Twitter or X, or any of these kind of platforms. When you're, and I don't think it's necessarily people in the industry. I think it's friend groups that are outside of it.
Yeah.
People who are outside of the bubble. We need to bring those people into the bubble, make that bubble bigger, and get them on the journey.
Mm.
They are looking for ways to avoid that because it's scary, and because it means they might have to have awareness of their own impact and influence on these things. Not necessarily direct responsibility, but influence, I think, is the key word.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely one of those quotable pub level headlines that you can
Yeah.
use to discount doing anything or something. And I think that is where the danger lies. It's like there must have been an option B for this headline. I'd love to know what that would have been. And I would hope that would have been a more empowering message of, I don't know quite how you'd make it empowering. I'm not a journalist, hence why I don't write these headlines. But I think there must have been a way of telling this story to make it empowering rather than fearful. But as we know, fear sells papers, not empowerment. But I think there is definitely an interesting angle here on the fact that the way you tell your story, either as a small business or as a large national or global publication with The Guardian, they've got other sister publications in different countries, they're a big organization. They carry some responsibility there in how they put forward this kind of message. And I know you can't make bad news good news every day of the week. That's not what we're implying here, but it is that thing of, is this the message you want to be putting out, and how can we maybe have made that headline a slightly different pub quote that could have actually been a way that people could have said, oh yeah, but here's a reason you should do it, rather than here's a really easy dead end quote to stop you doing something.
And I think this is where it gets more interesting with some of the headlines. And again, we've already discussed this is going to be an episode of like wind curtailment, where a headline I saw yesterday was that wind turbines have been turned off and cost consumers around £1 billion in the past year. That suddenly feels a lot more quotable, because it's like, okay, well, why is that happening? Why is the government allowing that to happen? In that my bill has gone up, so it's personal, it's affecting my daily life, by £1 billion, big scary number, because wind turbines, broadly good and cheap energy have been turned off illogical. And therefore,
Yeah.
the action I take from that headline is our government is potentially, all the policies are incompetent and not fit for purpose, and therefore we need to change them. Therefore, what do I do about that?
Yeah.
Whereas when it's that 57 companies, I don't
Yeah.
have responsibility or any connection to those
Yeah.
companies. 80% of emissions, too big, too scary. And greenhouse gas emissions, it feels too far away. That's not really something I see in my daily life.
Yeah.
Obviously, I do from a technical point of view, but in reality, a ton or a gigaton or a gram of carbon dioxide could all be the same size for all I care. It's very hard to visualize that. So I think that's where I think that empowerment piece comes in, of going, with sustainability messaging, we need to make sure that it's always put in the context of someone's daily life and the impact it's going to have on that,
Yeah.
both in positive and negative ways. And I think the more we can have headlines and or stories that are empowering to people's daily lives, the more successful adoption of sustainable action we will have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you are watching this and think, I've got a way that headline could have been much more impactful in a positive way, do let us know. I'd love to hear some ideas, if you've got any, of how you think that headline could have been presented in a different way. And we will be back shortly with another episode. And if you'd like to know when that episode comes out, then do press follow or subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. And if you've got a question for us about a net zero topic or anything we've discussed in any of the episodes, you can email info@small99.co.uk, or you can connect with me and Adam and start a conversation there. So thanks very much for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
See you soon.
Let's cut the bullshit.
Just drop the job.
Adm and Simon's